Hi YouTube, we're back with the ASW-28 from Volantex. Got this red light installed, just like the green light. This will be part 11 of the video series. And as I mentioned, we were going to go ahead and do the red one off film, or off camera, since you already saw the green one. Of course, this time I didn't have any problems, so it went super smooth. Now, the last light in the lighting series, part 4 of part 11, it's going to be the white tail light. And we're going to tap the servo for the elevator, for the rudder. So I just want to make sure I get the right one. This is going to be the elevator, and this is going to be the rudder. Okay, so I can feel it moving with my thumb. So we're definitely going to be using this channel. And so I'm just looking at the wires to chase them down. So it's going to be the one that's disconnected. Okay? So that's super easy to remember. And it looks like these are numbered: channel 4, channel 4, channel 3, channel 3. And this is taped down. It's going to eventually get tucked up in here. So we'll probably go ahead and leave some of the slack on these white cables. But just to give you a quick look at the so far progress on the wings, we've got full length flaps, crow, flapper-on configuration there. Got a little teeny bit of differential in. And so far everything's working really good, so it's going to look really cool when it's all said and done. I think it's going to fly well. But we're able to use the Lemon RX 7-channel with stabilizer. I'm just moving the receiver to show how that works. And of course we can turn the stabilizer on and off, on. And then we have a master gain here. So all sorts of cool features. So we're going to dig right into this tail light and get this project finished up on the lighting part. So now we need channel 4 for our power. So obviously we'll be taking that, and I'm just trying to decide whether or not to move the wings out of the way right now. I think we might need to. So I'm going to pause it and do that. Alright guys, so we're back to start installing this LED on the tail light, which will be the third and final light. And you saw in the first LED build video, which is, I think, number 7 maybe, I built this little assembly. And so now this little assembly is going to ride on the tail. And so I've got this thing set up in a bean bag, so it's kind of helps to be able to work at these weird angles. These planes always seem to need to be in a slightly weirder angle every time I do this. And it's hard on your back. So we're gonna mount this right there. Then I'm just toying with the idea of maybe drilling another hole to get this wire in a little quicker rather than chasing it up to the larger hole that's already there. And the only reason I'm concerned about that is because, of course, this rudder is going to need to slide in here. And then after taking a look closer, there's a pretty reasonably tight tolerance there. So it's not going to hurt anything to have a very small hole there. So I'll probably just go ahead and add one. And then here, when we're all done, this is going to be covered up with CA. So that's kind of where I'm thinking right now. And I just want to make sure I have the best chance at success, because once I start gluing this stuff, it's pretty much happening. So I'm going to go ahead and get a drill. Like we mentioned, it's not a very big hole that we need. So we'll probably start with the small holes we can get, and then work our way up from there. Okay, so Used to be just off to the side of this. Right here. Okay, so now keeping in mind that this is basically a plastic fuselage, so it's not fiberglass, so it's pretty easy to poke a hole in here. If this was fiberglass, I don't think I'd be doing it at all. I wouldn't cut the fiberglass unless I absolutely had to. This looks like we need to go up quite a few steps. This ought to do it though. Yep, that'll do it. Get that nice steep angle. Okay. Alright, very good. So that will get us the wire where we need it. Okay. So we'll just slip this in and try to get it up to this part so we can work on it easily. With the understanding that we have to leave room to put our mechanism through this all. So we're going to leave all the slack on this cable as we can. Everything that's in it, we're going to leave on it. Really, I can grab either of these because they're braided together. Okay, so now once that's in, now is the time where we would go ahead and start deciding how we want to handle the mount. Now I've got this extra white wire back here, which is what bridges the positive line from one LED to the next. Sorry, trying to keep it in the camera angle there. I think that's just going to tuck under like I had. That seemed to work pretty good. Okay, so now we want this to point mostly back. Okay, mostly back. But being that we don't have the rudder installed yet, there's a possibility we'll have to trim just a little bit on the inside, which isn't going to have any flight impact whatsoever, because you're not going to really move any air down at the bottom there. So I'll probably just go ahead and trim that now and just make life easy for everybody. I'm just going to take this, just take that bottom edge off. Okay, so that'll give us some extra clearance. Let's check and see if we got enough now. Oh yeah, that's even if the rudder was going to touch, which it's not, it's going to be out a little bit, we'd have plenty of room now. So now that just eases my concerns. So we can throw that wherever, I guess. And the next step would be to go ahead and glue this in here so it's secured into a fixed spot. So we'll just use medium. This is foam safe CA. We actually don't have to use foam safe CA, and it's a lot more expensive than just this standard stuff. I can buy an 8-ounce bottle for the price of 2 ounces of this. So this stuff is a way to go if you're doing this sort of thing. This is a medium non-foam safe CA, and it's not an odor-free as well. That's the other function that you have a big difference on. Okay, so I'm just going to get a little bit of glue on the wire, and then I'm going to take my kicker and pull this out. We'll just put one little drip right there to kind of get it set in place, and that way we don't have to worry about gluing our fingers, because once it's set, then I can just kind of leave it there and come back and use the glue to kind of tack it in place where I want. Be careful you don't tip that over. I just did that the other day. I don't know if you guys remember that, but kind of an expensive mistake. It's like $7 worth of whatever that stuff is, that kicker. Okay, so we'll just get a little bit on here and just be prepared to move this quickly. Because remember, it's like when you're flying and you're landing, for instance. Priority number one becomes get the glue to drip where you need it to. For just a few minutes, you got to kind of give this your full focus, because otherwise you'll end up looking away for a second or whatever. Next thing you know, you have a big weird drip. Okay, see, I've got a drip starting. Whoops. As long as it doesn't go onto my table saw, I don't care. Okay, so we've got our nice, fairly clean finish there. I'm going to grab this rag. I've got one little drip I want to get rid of. Okay. We'll just touch that and let that kicker work. This stuff tends to set up a little bit better. It's not a big difference. Actually, it's almost indistinguishable from the foam safe stuff. The biggest thing is how old is it? And I've noticed on the thin stuff will really kind of get crappy on you if you're not careful. And it will thicken up to be almost like the medium thickness. And so you got to be careful about that. And it's not like make or break expensive, but it's very expensive compared to some other stuff in the hobby. Okay, see what I just did there? I didn't like the way that glue was sitting, so I just scraped it off quick while it's still can be. Okay, and then I also noticed my battery slipped. So I'm going to slide that back in there just for a pressure fit. I don't want that flopping around. Alright, so now we can come back in here and just get a little bit more of this glue. And yes, it's a little on the ugly side right now. But the idea is to just protect all the electronics. And also give this some mechanical strength. So that when it's all said and done, this will only improve the strength of the plane. Same thing goes, same thing that I mentioned with the foam safe CA, is that this stuff does have a tendency to want to run a little bit more when you run kicker on it for just a second, and then it'll set back up. And like what happened here, it just ran through the cloth and then glued to me. No big deal. Just take a little acetone, you can wipe that right off. And if you don't have straight acetone, you can get like fingernail polish remover. That's what we usually use, because my wife will get that for me. You can get that at like the grocery store, or I think probably even the gas station or whatever. So if you don't have good resources available for stores and hobby shops and stuff. Okay, so now we're going to flip this upside down totally. We're going to try to get it kind of leveled out. And then I can get at this a little bit easier from the bottom. You may also find that sometimes it seems appropriate to get a little kicker first and apply the kicker to your workspace or where you want to get your stuff to stay put, and then go ahead and get it on there. Now you notice I have the tip touching. I usually don't do that as a rule, but sometimes you just got to do what it takes to control the glue while it's setting up. This is a pretty big, bulky light. But remember, whatever size you make this plastic is going to be about the size that the light appears to be. And so you won't probably be too upset about that here in a few minutes when you see how bright it is. Okay, so we got everything totally covered now. Totally covered. So now we can go back on to... I swear I just heard something fall, but I don't know what it is. I'm going to pause it and see if I can find it. Alright, so now that we've got that gluing done, got everything flipped over and got a little bit cleaned up here, we got this one wire now. You'll notice that there's a hole here, and there's a hole under here that you can't see, but there's two holes here, and what's got to happen is ultimately here, after we're all done, we're going to have to slide this in there, and then that's going to receive the rudder, horizontal and vertical stabilizer, and elevator as well. But this whole assembly goes like that, and it sandwiches. And so you have to make sure that you've got it set up inside with this wire so that you're going to be able to get that through without running into it. And that's why we're going to leave all this excess in here. Okay. Now the other thing we got to do is I knew at some point we'd have to do this. I just didn't know exactly when we'd have to do it. We're going to have to go and untape these, but we do not want to drop them into the fuse, because we're only going to gain access to number 4, not to number 3 necessarily. And so we can kind of move it out of the way. We have quite a bit of excess on those wires too, so we should be able to just verify quick. Yeah, we've got a little bit of excess there. So we can pull this back a little bit and it'll just move our receiver, which is fine. Okay. So now we can take number 3, since we're not going to be playing with that yet, we'll just tape it back down. Just if in doubt, tape it down. Because when they drop back into the frame and you have to dig them out, it's super frustrating. So, okay. Now this, remember, this can get pulled in at some point. I don't know how far it's going to get pulled. It's probably not going to get pulled very far. So we also need to get our resistor to be installed between this black wire and that black wire. The other one, just the red one, lands to the white one here. So I'm going to go ahead and get the iron hot again, and we'll start the process again. The wire's landed. Okay, while that's getting hot, let's separate out these lines. So now this is what I would call, it's actually a male connector, but I call it a female connector because of the housing, which is stupid, and I know that. I work on industrial electronics. It's not that big a deal. But a lot of people mistakenly think this is a female connector because the other end goes in here. Well, that's not the way it really works. It's the pins, the copper, actually male, make it a male. Okay, so what we're going to do is we have to separate these. If this were the other style of connector, you could just release the tabs and pop them out. Well, in order to release the tabs on this, you have to take this all apart. And so unless it comes, yeah, it doesn't come easy, I don't mess with it. So what I'll do instead is I'll just come back here with a sharp X-Acto knife without your finger right behind it. And I'll just jump in there between them. Make sure you don't open up to where you can see copper. We'll just separate a little bit of it. And we'll do the exact same thing on the other side. Okay? And then you can just access the wires that way. Okay? It works pretty good. It's not hard to do. Now the first one I want to do is the ground, because the ground I'm more vulnerable to making a mistake, i.e. forgetting to put the resistor in. So I'm going to take off a portion of this wire commensurate to the amount of resistor length. Okay, so I'm not going to keep that whole resistor wire on the front or the back, but we do want to keep as much of this wire as we can. In fact, this wire was tinned a long time ago, so I'll just cut off a little bit from both sides to even it up. And the negative line is going to dictate how long the positive line is going to be. So in this case, we'll just strip a little bit off, probably just a little bit more to make it easy. Okay, we'll clean this up just a little bit by twisting it. Now I normally don't add flux, but when you have a really old nasty wire, put a little bit of flux in there. It will help to clean that wire. You don't want to have a bunch of corrosive junk in there. Clean the tip, mechanically clean the tip, get down here, and now I'm not going to do that yet. I'll wait until I wrap it. It's easier to tin these wires while they're wrapped together. Okay, so this resistor is a resistor we picked back when we did that first part. We're going to just put a loop in this. Nothing magical about the way the loop goes, but you want to keep it back far enough if you can, so you get a second chance if you make a mistake. Okay, so then we can take and wrap this around as well. Just like that. Maybe do another loop. Okay, so now, because this is a fairly thick gauge wire, it's a little bit hard to pull this tight. I'm just going to try to squish it down a little bit. Okay, like I did there. And then that excess length of wire can either be cut off later or it can be cut off now. So given we have the opportunity to do it now, we'll go ahead and do it now. Now hopefully the solder will bridge over the sharp end and we won't have to worry about that, but there's a possibility we'll end up with a sharp end where that had continued on. I'm going to do a trick. You guys see the stripper's got a lock on them? It doesn't look like it's going to work on this one. See, it's got too big of an opening. I'll see if I can grab onto the... Nope, don't want to do that. I'll end up damaging it. I was just going to see if I could hold it, make it easier. Clean the tip, clean the tip. Solder's ready. Come in here, get a little bit of heat, get it done with the soldering iron. Now we're going to look at the work, study it, make sure it's not super hot. Yeah, we look good. It's a little big, but whatever. That's life. That thing is really hot. Okay, so now that we got that done, we can go ahead and figure out how long we want this to be. by probably retwisting up to the splice or close to it. And in this case, because we aren't going to actually be able to slide the heat shrink over easily, you could hypothetically slide the heat shrink over this side, but it's not going to matter because you're going to end up with an exposed portion anyway. So my recommendation is don't worry about it. So I'm going to come out about a 1/4 inch or so, make my loop. Ooh, actually we'll do this the other way. We'll leave this straight. Now we need to figure out where we want to actually land that so we can try to make them about the same. Now you've got this strip from here to here, right? Pulled apart from one another. Give yourself a spot to land the negative, and then land your positive in a different spot. And that way, even if your tape fails, you'll still be able to go ahead and have a separation so there's no short circuit. So I'm going to grab this, I'm going to pull toward the connector, that's the weaker portion. Okay, so we expose a little bit of copper. And just like before, we'll grab the X-Acto knife, and we'll take the X-Acto knife with a sharp blade, and we'll just go in between, try to split the difference. And then we'll spin the blade. That's going to open up a hole for us. Now we can take this, slide it through. Very simple. Now pull your wire and it'll tighten. Okay. Looks like we broke a couple of strands there. That's unfortunate, but it's not going to be that big a deal. The solder joint is going to be much stronger than the rest of the wire anyway, but it would be preferred to not break those, of course. Okay, so now I'm just holding on to the resistor as I wrap this. Trying to get a nice tight weave, but it's not going to be that tight. And that's not that critical either. Okay. Okay, so now put this on the side if it matters, if you care. I'm going to take, and before I tin this, I'm going to just squish that sharp end to the inside some. That way there's no sharp edge to protrude out of the solder joint here in a minute. Okay, so now we can go ahead and get the soldering iron, clean it, solder it. Okay, now let it cool for a second, come back and just do it again. Alright, so that's done now. Well, I mean, we got to tape over it, but the soldering is done. Now we got to get the positive side. Okay, so now we can come up in here, and we'll probably go ahead and grab a little bit of black tape just to keep things simple. Like I said, if you really wanted to make it hard on yourself, you could take apart that connector, but I'm not doing that. Take about an inch or so, inch and a half, something like that. I'm going to grab this for the next one too. So we got our white tape over here. Now, we probably don't even need this much, but what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and wrap tight first, and then we'll just work our way around and walk down the length to where we've then protected the solder joint and also immobilized it to a certain degree, which will help it to be mechanically stronger as well. Okay, because we're going to have to pull that up in here in a minute when we land our wires for the rudder and elevator. Okay. Alright, so we got that done. Now I've got our white wire exposed and ready to be landed. Now we don't want to land at the exact same spot, so we'll land it back kind of in the middle where the resistor is, because even if this tape would fail or if something would heat up unexpectedly, we would have a little bit more protection this way. Okay, expose that, then we're going to go ahead and we'll stick and strip back from right about where we expect it to hit. Okay, strip off the excess sheath. I don't recommend shortening this wire until you're done with this next step. Get in there and fan open the hole with your knife. If you accidentally cut this wire here, don't freak out. It's not that big a deal. I mean, it's a lot better if you don't have to, but if you don't have to fix it, but it's really not that hard to fix if you do. Okay, so now this has that oxidation on it that I didn't like before. So I'm going to go ahead and shorten it a little bit so I can dip it in the flux a little easier. Okay, because you don't want a bunch of oxidation and issues causing a bad solder joint. Okay, clean it, clean it. I don't know why I did that. I don't need it yet. I gotta slide this through first, guys. Okay, so we got it through the hole. Then we'll stop just shy of pulling that all the way tight, and then we'll wrap it. We'll give it, I don't know, like 3 wraps or something like that. There's nothing magical about 3 wraps. If you can only get 2, get 2. If you can get 47, that's probably overkill. Okay, so that's good enough. I'm going to trim off the excess. It's very tempting to use scissors to trim these things. You can get a really nice tight trim. Okay, here we go. Make sure it's the way you want it to be, and then solder it. Meaning the direction that the wire sticks out of the other wire. Because it gets awkward when you've got wires that want to fight each other. So you see what I'm saying? Because this is going to... Ultimately, it's actually going to double back on itself. The whole thing is going to be taped like this. Isn't it? Yeah, because my rudder is going to plug in here and then it's going to get pulled back. So I want it to pull this way. Okay, so at this point we can use the white electrical tape to go ahead and get a little bit of protection superficially for that joint. And then we'll go ahead and test in just mere moments whether or not the electronics are going to be happy with this. I have no reason to believe that they won't be, because we've already bench tested all this stuff before we put it all together. Okay, so this is not only going to give us some mechanical strength, immobilizing the splice, but it's also going to protect it from short circuit. Alright, so now we're going to put this back like this, and then we're going to tape it, or we could heat shrink it, but in my case I'm too lazy for heat shrink, so we're going to use tape. But white electrical tape is more expensive, and I have a plethora of black electrical tape. I should say it's more expensive. It's really not more expensive. It's differently expensive. Okay, so just more abundant. You can get more multi-packs. How about that? Alright, cool. Okay, so now the first thing we got to do is get this thing plugged in to the power. Battery's up here. ESC's falling out. There you go, kids. What kids? That is cool. It's going to be nice and bright. Okay, so the same thing we did before. We'll go ahead and sand this up, just to get a little extra light refraction. And then we'll be about ready to get the rudder mounted up there. That's nice and bright, guys. Let's shut off the lights and show you. Okay, well, I gotta shut off the soldering iron too. So with the lights off, this is what you've got. It's lighting up this whole area. Of course, it doesn't show very good in the camera, but it's enough to blind you. And this rudder, my expectation is that it will probably drop just on top of it, so it'll actually light up the tail sticking out a little bit, which is really cool. So guys, I really appreciate you sticking in there with us on this project series. It's been long and tedious, but also awesome at the same time, I hope one of you said. But either way, that's going to probably wrap it up for this video. And I will just do myself a favor and start the next video working on probably the rudder and the horizontal stabilizer, got a little bit of assembly to do there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check the description below, and you can see links on where to buy this ASW-28 from Volantex. The guys at Banggood sent this to me to review it, so I'd appreciate you buying it there if you have a choice, and you'll help support the channel. There's some other items, soldering stuff and other airplanes that I've reviewed, so check it out, guys, and come back for more. Thanks for watching.